Well, welcome everybody. My name is Amy Novickis-Brash and I am the moderator for this session. This presentation is Gateway to the City of Ellensburg Stormwater LID Retrofit. And I'm going to start off with introducing our presenters. We have Kaela Mansfield, who is a project engineer at Osborn Consulting Spokane office. Her primary focus areas include stormwater LID design and fish passage, as well as habitat restoration work, aligning with her interest in preserving and protecting the natural environment in urban settings. Megan Ehlebracht is a stormwater engineer at Osborn Consulting in their Spokane office, and she is an EIT. She's a recent Gonzaga University graduate who's interested in green stormwater infrastructure and stream restoration. And we have John Morrow. He is the stormwater manager for the City of Ellensburg. And prior to working at the city, he worked for the City of Kirkland and Bothell, as well as Cascadia Consulting. He attended Western Illinois University and Evergreen State College to earn a degree in public health, pathology, and hydrology. And in his free time, he likes to farm. So with that, I will, and if there are any questions you have, please type them in the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, I'll read through them for our presenters, and I'll turn it over to Kaela.
Great, thanks, Amy. Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started talking about this great project, the Gateway to the City of Ellensburg Stormwater LID Retrofit. We'll just assign some pictures to the names that Amy just went over. Again, I'm Kaela. I have been at Osborn for 2 years, and on this project, I served as the Deputy Project Manager.
Hi, I'm Megan. I am an EIT at Osborn Consulting in the Spokane office, and I have been helping to support the design of this project.
And I'm John Morrow, City of Ellensburg, Project Manager for Gateway.
Great, thanks. So next I'll go over the presentation outline. John is going to walk us through the project background and vision. And then Megan and I will discuss unique stormwater design and maintenance elements for the project. We'll talk about key takeaways and wrap up with the project status. So to give a little background, I've included a vicinity map. You can see I-90 in the lower left or southwest portion of the map. The project limits are identified in the big red box. It's northwest of the city center on University Way. And I'd like to highlight a few water bodies shown on this map. We have Whiskey Creek that actually flows through our project. Mercer Creek is just downstream of our project. And both of those flow into Wilson Creek further downstream and then eventually onto the Yakima River. I'd like to highlight Wilson Creek because it currently has a TMDL for bacteria, total suspended solids, and temperature. It is our hope, and we are optimistic, that this project will help reduce the pollutant loads downstream. Now I'm going to pass it over to John.
Thanks for coming. This is a big project. Some of the highlights: it's a LID stormwater retrofit project. It's a non-vegetated bioinfiltration. We're going to use that as a form of water quality treatment. Over here, we have rockline swales. We don't do vegetated swales because we'd have to water them, and we have approximately 7 months with no precipitation over here. We only average about 9 inches a year, and most of that is in the form of snow. This project will be using the 60/40 compost for treatment, and they'll go into that later. But we have permeable paver pathways on both sides, 7-foot sidewalk on one side, a 12-foot trail on the other side. Relocating the utilities underground has been fun. Everything under the sun is out there, franchisees to our own light and gas department. It's a 2-mile project. It's 1 mile in each direction of the University Way from about Wenas Street out to the Red Horse Diner. This was grant funded. We wrote the grant in 2017 with the Department of Ecology, and the design is almost finished. And we look to going out to bid probably here in May and build it this summer and fall, and hopefully there'll be no problems. Next slide. Some of the goals. the top goal is we're providing water quality treatment in an industrial and light industrial corridor. There is no treatment currently for that storm system on University Way. Everything enters Whiskey and Mercer Creeks untreated. One of the things that I drive home about this project is with LID Stormwater Retrofit, you also get other amenities with those projects. Just the enhancement of beautification, and you'll see here in a minute, we're going to have some non-motorized transportation benefits and recreation benefits. We also designed this with future maintenance in mind. And this will also link up this project with a levee reconnect and a bridge in a building just south of it. And we want to connect that up with that trail. This project here connects up with the 7th Avenue bike lane. And then someday this will connect up with the John Wayne Trail. Now it's called the Cascade Trail, but that was sort of the big vision here in mind. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So existing conditions. This is what it looks like today. Like I said, it's a light industrial corridor. We have 3 ways into Ellensburg: University Way, Canyon Road, and Vantage Highway. This is one of the main entry points. If you're going to go to Central Washington University, you usually come in through the West Interchange, and this is what you see when you come into town. Our city council for a lot of years has wanted to change the look of this, and we, in being successful in writing this grant, when it's finished, it will look like the proposed condition there on your screen, and it will be a much needed benefit to the city of Ellensburg. So we're getting a big bang for water quality treatment that isn't currently there, non-motorized transportation, recreation, and beautification. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kaela.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So I am going to start talking about unique stormwater design elements for this project. As John just mentioned, we're proposing swales to line both sides of the street on the entire length of the corridor. When the grant was first written, an initial literature search was conducted for arid and semi-arid applications of water quality treatment swales, and in particular, those with low irrigation needs. As John mentioned, there's not a lot of precip in this area. So what we came up with is a rock-lined swale similar to the image shown on the right. And we're going to instead use more of a basalt chip mulch, which is a little bit more regionally appropriate for this area. The engineered soil media will be just under the basalt mulch, so it will provide the same treatment just like a traditional vegetated or grass-lined swale would be. We reached out to city maintenance staff to make sure that their feedback was incorporated during the grant writing and design of these swales. We are including trees for aesthetic purposes along the center line of the swales. And those are primarily included for aesthetic. They provide some nutrient uptake, but they're not the primary treatment mechanism. Again, that's that engineered media. Following establishment, these trees will also not require long-term irrigation. So that really helps, again, with that low maintenance goal. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Another unique element on this project is the pathway surfacing that we're proposing. So because this project is ecology grant funded, pavement must be permeable in order to qualify for funding. Eastern Washington has had some challenges with permeable pavement surface implementation, and so we wanted to make sure that we included a predictable and reliable material. We led the city through an alternatives analysis at 30%, and we looked at pervious concrete, porous asphalt, and permeable pavers as our options for the pavement material. We considered things like cost, the material availability, and then specifically, again, that reliability and predictability of the final surface. Our research found that the construction process is really what determines the ultimate success of the final product, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. The pavers end up providing the most predictable paving result when compared with the pervious concrete or porous asphalt, as those latter two can often result in surface inconsistencies. And since the intended use of the surfacing is pedestrians, we needed to make sure that ADA design requirements would be met along the whole length of the trail. This can be a little bit more difficult if there are surface inconsistencies. So we are excited to use these permeable pavers. An example is shown on the left. We are sloping the paver section toward the swales. This is to prevent any overflow going back towards the right-of-way and towards private property or future clogging in the event of a large storm event. Another unique feature is that we're including a sand media treatment layer at any areas where there are driveway path intersections. This will provide water quality treatment for those PGIS areas where cars coming in and out of businesses might be leaching pollutants as they cross the trail. Elsewhere, we don't need the sand media treatment layer because the primary user is going to be pedestrians and they don't leach those same nasty chemicals, fortunately for us. Another item I'll highlight are the soil conditions on our site. In the 1970s, this was a washed-out highway and later became the city-owned street, University Way. Sometime in that period, there was pretty significant fill placed on the entirety of the corridor within our site limits, and those depths vary between 4 and 8 feet on top of native soils. We had a geotech engineer to help us with the subsurface soil investigation for the project. And we found that we had low infiltration rates and a high groundwater condition on the northwest portion of the site, and higher infiltration rates and lower groundwater, so more favorable conditions in the southeast portion of the site. We really wanted this design to encourage native infiltration as much as possible, but not at the cost of causing any ponding in the swales. And so for this reason, we included under drains in those areas with low infiltration rates, and we followed ecology guidance for how we sited those. With ecology's recommendation, we also included elevating the under drains. And again, that will just really promote that native infiltration as much as possible. Also, in the areas of poor infiltration, we're proposing a mix of shrubs in lieu of the trees to provide a complementary aesthetic. The landscape architect had some concerns about the trees getting wet feet. So we're proposing some element to provide some aesthetics, but just not the trees in that area. And now I'm going to hand it over to Megan to talk about some cool maintenance elements.
Thanks, Kaela. A unique maintenance element of this project are sediment sumps included behind curb cut inlets. As shown in the figures, runoff from the roadway flows through the curb cut inlets and into the sumps, which are standard concrete inlets that allow fines and sediment to settle out before the water overflows to the swales for treatment. These sumps were proposed through coordination with the city maintenance staff for the purpose of reducing long-term swale maintenance. Placing sumps behind curb cut inlets and before swales is a great way to reduce clogging in the swales and also extend the design life of the swale treatment media. And another unique maintenance element of this project, next slide, Kaela, was our plant selection. Male maidenhair ginkgo biloba trees were chosen for this project due to their aesthetics and low long-term maintenance needs. These trees collectively lose their leaves at the same time, reducing the number of trips for maintenance to go out to remove leaves. Ginkgo trees are also sun-loving and drought-tolerant, which is great for a semi-arid climate, and it also reduces long-term irrigation needs. To add to this resiliency, these trees are also stormwater pollutant tolerant while still providing some nutrient uptake. Specific shrubs were also chosen for this project due to their low maintenance needs and drought tolerance. Overall, the specific trees and shrubs chosen for this project are also great options for other stormwater projects in semi-arid climates, trying to reduce maintenance and also provide beautification. And now we're going to talk about some key takeaways from the project. And one of those key takeaways occurred during the grant development phase, where we learned the importance of coordinating early on with ecology to determine grant eligible and ineligible items. It's important to identify big ticket items such as trees and an irrigation system and confirm their eligibility early on. Then you can work with the client to identify alternative funding mechanisms if those items are not covered by the primary grant. This proactive approach will better allow the project vision to come to life. And now Kaela is going to talk about some more key takeaways.
Great, thanks, Megan. So the next key takeaway I am going to highlight is about sensitive cultural areas. We use the Department of Ecology and Historic Preservation, or DAPS Wizard tool. This tool provides a high-level survey assessment of culturally or archaeologically sensitive areas throughout Washington state. We use this web application at the 30% design, and we actually identified a highly sensitive area within our project limits. We worked with the city to figure out how we wanted to address this and move the design forward. What we determined was to adapt the design and minimize impacts in this location as much as possible. This will help the city avoid any costly delays that could occur during construction. So in this area, we are proposing to eliminate the swale and instead opt for an at-grade landscape strip. And then we'll also have some shrubs located here instead of the trees. Both of these options will minimize excavation and keep it less than 24 inches below the ground, and that'll really help us avoid disturbing any sensitive areas. It will also create a cohesive blended corridor aesthetic, which will help maintain the project vision. The next item I'll highlight is adapting a typical design approach. So as John mentioned earlier, this is a stormwater retrofit project. So our improvements are limited to behind the back of curb and the right of way. So just that area between those two. We had proposed initially a typical design section. And when we were out at the site initially doing a site visit, it sure looked really flat while we were out there. But once we got a little bit further into design, and we really were looking at the footprint of our improvements, we found that there was a really wide footprint that the swale and path create. Our swale is 9 feet wide and the path at its widest is 12 feet, as John mentioned earlier. So that makes a 21-foot section behind the curb, and that really consumes a fair amount of the available right-of-way. And we still need to make sure we can tie in, again, within that right-of-way and not have our improvements go beyond and into private property. So in some of these locations on the site, there were some steep slopes, and that made it so we really needed to reevaluate that typical section and make sure we had some flexibility in it, or maybe even look at some different options. One location in the image shown below is an area where we have adapted the design a little bit to alleviate some of those concerns. So the curb line is highlighted in green, and the blue line shows the original back of path. What we ended up deciding was to eliminate the swale in this location. You can see the original back of path, and then in the red, the original tie-in line, and that actually occurs beyond the right-of-way and in private property. We looked at different options here, including putting a wall, but we decided that eliminating the swale in this location was the best option to move forward. So the adjusted back of path and tie-in line are indicated with solid lines, and you can see that this new approach made it so that the grading tie-in point was well within the right-of-way, and we don't have to have any concerns about getting temporary construction easements. One other location where we implemented this similar approach, where we snugged the trail up behind the path and eliminated the swale, is an area where there's an irrigation ditch culvert extension. And in both of these locations, it's unfortunate to lose the swale, but we really determined that by doing this, we're concentrating funding where the treatment value will be realized the most. And this gives the city the biggest bang for their buck for this water quality treatment funding grant. And now I'm going to turn things back over to Megan.
Thanks, Kaela. Another key takeaway was the importance of coordinating with vendors throughout the design process. As previously mentioned in the presentation, the city had concern about permeable pavement and its construction due to previous experiences with permeable pavement surfaces being uneven. So OCI facilitated meetings with the city and the vendor to address this and other concerns. This led to the vendor agreeing to be present during the installation and construction of the permeable pavement pathway. And the vendor's presence during construction will better ensure that the permeable pathway surface meets the city's expectations and provides a rideable surface for all the pathway users. And now, finally, we're going to talk about the project status. The idea for a welcoming gateway to the city of Ellensburg was created a few years back, but through collaboration with the city, the Department of Ecology, and OCI staff, this project was awarded stormwater grant funding. And this collaboration continued throughout the design process, which started in 2019, and the 100% designs are currently being reviewed by the city. And we have greatly enjoyed working on this project, including the grant application and design portions, and are excited for its construction this summer and fall. And again, this project is getting constructed this summer and fall. So grab your bike or your walking shoes and head out to University Way, the gateway to the city of Ellensburg.
And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you all for your attention and listening. Are there any questions?
We have some time for questions. There aren't any yet in the chat box, but I made some notes so I could ask. One of them I was going to ask is, you talked about getting maintenance feedback on the design, and it helps to inform some of your decisions. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. John, do you want to talk about the city maintenance staff, or do you want?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
We chose the Ginkgo trees for one simple reason. They're beautiful when they turn solid gold all at the same time in the fall. Plus they drop their leaves all at the same time. So this project will likely have a contractor oversee the maintenance, who oversees all the maintenance at all city facilities. And they will be able to, we'll close the trail on both sides. We'll be able to blow the leaves up onto the trail. And then we'll have our two high efficiency sweepers sweep all those leaves up at the same time. And we envision probably a 1 to 2 day maintenance schedule for probably dealing with the leaves. We didn't want to have leaves that fall constantly all the time on wet surfaces. That could be a problem for bicycles. So the Ginkgo trees were chosen for beauty, for one, and two, for maintenance.
A question that we have in the chat box is probably for John. How much effort is required from the city to keep the proposed permeable pavement functioning? Any unique maintenance elements?
So we purchased 2 high efficiency Elgin sweepers, crosswinds, a couple of years ago. And they are going to make not just the fall leaf litter cleanup, they're going to do a spring run too, to remove any fines or sediment that would find themselves in between the porous pavers.
The next comment is from Seth. He says, what a great project. The ecology project manager must be pretty great.
We agree.
Seth is our project manager from Department of Ecology.
The next one is, does the project address stormwater runoff pollution or flooding? Are there water bodies nearby?
So this project is a water quality project. It is a treatment project only. It's not a flow control project. So we are treating the first ½ inch of rainfall in the 24-hour period. That's what's in our Eastern Washington design manual. It is pure and simple a water quality project to remove pollution off of University Way that is currently not removed from water bodies, Whiskey Creek and Mercer Creek, which drain to Wilson and the Yakima River.
You mentioned an irrigation system. Is that to get trees and shrubs established for the short term and not a long-term need?
That would be correct.
And then, do you have any, there's not another question, so I'll ask another one while we wait for somebody else. Do you have any concerns during construction?
Anytime you have a construction project of this magnitude, I have concerns. This is a $3.5–4 million project, but this will have 0 change orders. I can just count on it. So,
there you go.
Because it's been designed so well by Osborn, we're foolproof.
Okay. So we've got about 4 minutes left. Oh, here's another question. What type of archaeological historical issues are you running into?
Well, I can't go into detail. That's a DAP issue. We went through the entire 0505 process. There's an area that where our design is a little bit different than some other areas, and I can't go into detail on that. That you'd have to contact DAP to get any detail on that.
Okay. Have any private properties encroached in the right-of-way? If so, how are you addressing this?
So that's a great question. A couple years ago, we had a big campaign with our code enforcement people. Yes, people over the years have encroached up to behind the curb, and I'm going to say with success and no pain. It was all through education. Everybody now has moved back off of the right-of-way into the appropriate area on their private property, and we are wide open and ready to go.
Okay. I don't see any other questions, and so good job. If there's other questions that pop up, we can, I think the Stormwater Center will email them to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.